What has worked for you in terms of attracting the constant influx of professionals that are willing to do this work for you?
That was one of the challenges that managers were facing. And the word, it's focus, it's focus, it's focus.
What do you tend to suggest your partners to eat as a cost of doing business versus something worth charging the guest for?
It's a messy situation that takes people back to, I'm just going to stay at the hotel because I don't want to have to deal with those kind of things. We should be embarrassed as an industry.
What do property managers, from your experience, tend to struggle with the most?
The folks that get to that future as fast as possible will win the market.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin. Together, I'm excited today to be with Jonathan Wicks, founder and CEO at Well and Good Professional Services. So, Jonathan, very excited to have you on. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Sebastian. It's nice to be on the Hospitality Edge.
Yeah, for sure, man. So, look, the Hospitality Edge, we like to start with, a question around what does hospitality mean to you, and how do you deliver hospitality, and what would you consider your edge to be in the way that you like to deliver hospitality?
Yes. So hospitality to me is about the most personal thing that you can have when it comes to the human to human experience. I think so many times we try to broaden hospitality out, and really when hospitality happens, it's when there is a human to human connection. It is when there is something that is known about, let's say, a guest, and we do that intentional gift based off of that birthday or that anniversary. It's when we pick up a cue at the restaurant that somebody is celebrating something, and then we can make that happen. And those little things that are picked up by humans in the moment oftentimes are the moments of hospitality. And that edge is delivered when people are paying attention. I feel like, and that's so much of what we have to be doing in hospitality, is trying to pay attention to our guests and pay attention to those that we are trying to wow, and looking for those cues, because it's in those moments that the wow factor happens. And I think that our company has definitely looked to do that, and with working with our partners, saying what little bits of information can we get that would then wow somebody on a very human, personal basis.
I love it. That's amazing, Jonathan. What a way to start. So, Jonathan, let's get a little bit into your story. Let's go back to your very first entrepreneurial journey. So how did you get into entrepreneurship first, and then we'll get into how you actually ended up in this industry?
I usually skip over the part that we had a pretty booming lawn service in high school, because I don't know if that was an official business or not, but I think my first...
No, don't skip it. Don't skip it,
It
please.
was real. My brothers and I, we would have quite the... I remember in the summer times, we'd be cutting grass all the time. And then in the winters, we had snow in Nebraska, and the snow days for us were not play days. It was when we would go to all of our clients, and we had a huge list of folks that we had to be doing the snow plowing. We'd be up all night in those nights, and that was high school. But my main first company was when I was in college. I always had wanted to start an official company, and I was Googling about best businesses to start. One of them was a tile and grout cleaning franchise that was looking to be sold, and I didn't have money to buy a franchise, but I did go out on Craigslist and bought the machine that they were selling that did tile and grout cleaning. And I was in business, and I started going to different places, restaurants primarily, that had tile and grout that needed to be cleaned. And we then scaled that company to service restaurants all across Northwest Indiana and Chicagoland, completing third shift janitorial services and tile and grout cleaning with a bunch of my college buddies at the time. And that was where I cut teeth in business. It was right there in the middle of a college experience where I had to do overnights in the middle of a full-time schedule of school. And I loved it. I didn't sleep a lot back then, though. As I guess now.
Do you now?
There are days, but yes, you're right. As an entrepreneur, sleep is always a little bit of an optional thing.
Right. Okay, got it. So you did that for a little while, and then what happened with that business? You sold it, or you just moved on?
I did sell it. I was graduating college. After about a year after I graduated college, I had gotten into another venture, and I was still running this cleaning company with all the college folks, and I ended up selling that to the CFO of the college, and that CFO still runs it today using a lot of the college labor. It was really a good system for folks that were looking for that nighttime work, and so it worked out. But that was that was the transition away from my first cleaning business.
Got it. And then you got into asset management. I don't know if that's the way you would refer to it, but yeah, what was next in
Yes.
your career?
So at that time, you're looking at 2008 and 9 and 10, and during those times, you'd remember back the foreclosure crisis was happening across our country, and the recession was happening. Within that, there was a need for the maintaining of a lot of homes that had gone into foreclosure and were now sitting there empty. And so these assets were sitting empty and exposed to the elements, and there was a lot of problems with that. And what our company did was look to preserve those assets. We were doing everything from making sure that the properties were secure, making sure that they were waterproof. We had a lot of mold remediation and replacing roofs and water intrusion and everything that happens with these properties while they're sitting there empty. There's a lot that can go wrong. And we were there to preserve the asset until the bank could eventually sell those properties. And so that was the business that I got into in 2009. And I ran that for the last for about 10 years until 2019. And we serviced the Midwest of the United States, so we were servicing about 7 states across the Midwest area.
So there's a trend, right? Servicing, as a business, which leads you to what you're currently doing, right? You're currently, a full scale servicing solution for short-term rentals. So I guess, how did you get into the short-term rental industry? How did you get exposed to this space? And tell us about that transition from what you were doing then and you did for a while, 10 years, in terms of, how you got into getting started with well and good professional services.
Yeah, so like a lot of us, I got into the short-term rental space first as a guest and then as a host. So I had a property that was in northern Illinois. I'm sorry, that was a lake house that I was renting on Airbnb. So I was renting that property out, and so I got to see the industry from a host perspective. And it was right around that time of 2019 that I was transitioning out of the asset protection company. I had sold the majority of that company, and I was looking to be a passive investor. I was not looking to start another business. But with this lake house, I had such a challenge of getting the property serviced correctly. I was looking at, how do we get the laundry done for these 10 beds that are in this lake house? And how do I get the supplies to the house? I was sending things on Amazon and then sending them to the cleaners or sending them to the house itself. And it was always a problem. And I do like to solve problems, especially in industries that have that element of the newness as well as the upside. And I think that short-term rentals provide so many upsides. So I looked at my experience with service and with all the different kind of the blue collar approach that we had taken to the previous companies, and I thought that this was an industry that really could use high level servicing. And so it was in February of 2020 that I decided I was going back into entrepreneurship. It was going to start well and good, and that was going to be the company that I felt was needed in an industry
Mhm.
that desperately needed standardization on the servicing side.
Interesting. And so you decided to go on the servicing side. You were a host. I guess this was your property. You could have gone like many, on the full service property management side, where you would take care of the whole servicing as well as the bookings. But you decided to say, no, let me focus on the servicing. I'm curious to know why.
You mentioned the word, it's focus. It's focus. It's focus. As an industry expands and becomes, what now is a large part of modern travel, we are not able to have companies that can be a one size fits all solution. There has to be a very much a focus on excellence. And I think that was one of the challenges that managers were facing, was trying to do everything, trying to
Mhm.
operate with the guest experience and operate with property acquisitions and revenue management. Oh, and by the way, we need to get all this on-site property servicing done, which requires a ton of staffing and a ton of training and all the inventory. And that's where I just felt like there was a pinch point between the focus factors, and there really needed to be a company that was obsessed over that turnover process on the full scale basis. And that focus, I believe, leads to excellence, not just in our company, but with managers as well, allowing them to focus more so on the guest and more so on those properties. And focus is everything in business. And that's why I felt like there was a need for an independent servicing company.
Yeah, no, I love it. And so independent servicing company, of course, there's cleaning, there's linens, there's essentials for guests. if we look at each of those categories, I mean, what do property managers, from your experience, tend to struggle with the most? You've talked about standardization as what you're trying to accomplish there. What is it that you find is the hardest element of it all? Is it the human element, or is it more the establishing the right procedures? What do you think it is?
Well, I think a lot of people would say, just in a general sense, the phrase "it's hard to find good help," right? So people say
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to find good people, and I agree to that. But I think the reason for that oftentimes is because we are not doing our jobs in setting up those people for success. And so I think that the systems or lack thereof have caused us to have a problem in finding good people, because the best professionals do not want to go into a madness mess. They want to be doing what they are as professionals. So let's take housekeepers. Housekeepers are professional cleaners. That is what they have chosen as their career. However, our industry has oftentimes asked them to be also a laundry attendant and an inventory manager. And those are not the things that they do as professionals. And asking them to do so oftentimes leads to a dearth of the actual professionals wanting to be in this space. And the best professionals said, we're not going to be servicing these short-term rentals. We're going to go back to servicing regular houses, because that allows us to do what we are there as professionals to do. So I think that the challenges that people face are, yes, in getting good help, but oftentimes that's a result of not having the systems in place. And the reason they don't have the systems goes back to they're not focused on that. That's not the primary core of a traditional property manager. And so I think we solve it with systems first that allow the professionals to be attracted, knowing that they are then set up for success.
That's very interesting. So you're saying, instead of expecting or hoping that your cleaner is going to do everything, let them focus on that one area, and ensure that you have people to do inspections and to do inventory management and to do other areas as well, which makes sense. But there's still an element of, like, it's still, would you agree, hard to attract those people? Like, you might have the best processes, you might have the best everything. What has worked for you in terms of attracting this kind of a worker, which is not as simple as just going on LinkedIn and just clicking on a button and running a campaign where you're just gonna have applicants come in? I mean, this is a different crowd that you might find elsewhere. What has worked for you in terms of attracting and making sure that you can have a constant influx of professionals that are willing to do this work for you?
So I think first we have to really be understanding and appreciative of the work that these professionals provide. So we are big on letting them know, like, we kind of have sat in the seat of professionals. Everybody in our company has really done this work and therefore really respects this work. And there's a the draw for cleaners is that Well and Good was set up primarily for their benefit. And so then they see that, and that does lead to some of the cliche things of, like, the best cleaners have found us, and even more so than us going out and doing that. But that's been one side. The other side is we do feel like, the work should be shown off a little bit of the actual accolades. We wanted to bring names and faces to the oftentimes nameless and faceless individuals of our industry, and that is the people that are doing the work. And so there's some highlights and recognition that is tough to give, if it's not your company's primary core focus. But for us, with the people being our core focus, we've been able to see our professionals come in and they see an actual trajectory for success. They can see other folks that have been in front of them that have maybe earned a badge. We have a whole badge system and a merit-based system that allows people to work their way up as individuals and as individual professionals. Even if you're an independent contractor, there are still levels and statuses that you can achieve within our company that can really bring that path of success. You don't always have to change your profession to be developing as a professional. A cleaner can remain as a cleaner, but can be advancing in their career and advancing in their growth as a professional, even without turning into a manager or something that is outside of cleaning. And so we've really tried to have folks be very respected in the position that they are in, but also then feel like they have advancements within that very position.
I like it. It's almost like you're gamifying the process of them doing a good job.
Everybody wants to have tangible success right in front of them. What does success look like? Patrick Lencioni wrote a great book called The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And the first sign, he brought up this thesis that there are miserable people in every type of jobs. Whether it's a high-paying job or low-paying job, there's miserable people and there's happy people. So what are the signs of a miserable job? The first sign of a miserable job was immeasurability. The inability to measure whether what you're doing is actually successful or not. You're just going through the motions and it doesn't matter, and you feel like there's no barometer for success. We have totally changed that. Our cleaners know exactly what success looks like. They know that if they nail it, it is going to be noticed, it is going to be shouted out, they're going to be advancing because of that. And that element of, okay, if I do this, there is a reward on the other side for that beyond just compensation. It is a reward of fulfillment and a reward of acknowledgement. And that, I believe, is a motivating factor just as much or more than compensation.
What are the other two? I'm curious.
Oh, so you had immeasurability. Oh my goodness, you're putting me on the spot. Immeasurability. Circle back to me on this. We might need to cut
come
that.
back. It's gonna come back. Yeah.
Immeasurability is the first sign of a miserable job. The other ones have to do with community. There's one that has to do with community, and then there's another one that has to do with advancement opportunity. I think those are the three, but I forget the specific words.
That makes sense. Yes. And so, okay, so there's the gamifying aspect of it all, like create incentives that are aligned with the outcomes you're trying to achieve. Now, I'm curious to know, when it comes to those outcomes, right? Are you more of the approach of measuring those outcomes based on, let's say, you measure how good cleaning was done. Do you tie that back to the reviews in a way? Or is it more so like with the inspections that you have, just managers, like kind of like, I guess there's a bit of both, but have you explored like tying those incentives towards the outcome in terms of the reviews and associating that back to the actual cleaner who was responsible for that cleaning review, for example?
Definitely have explored that, and we use as much data as possible coming back to us about the reviews. Oftentimes that data is given to us by the managers that are managing the property or the host or the owners that are receiving those reviews, because Well and Good doesn't get those specifically. So we're relying on that information from a third party, but we do get those reviews and we ask for both the good and the bad, right? We obviously are going to know about the things that are not great, but certainly there's so many reviews that are just raving about this. So that allows us to give a little bit of measurability, but there's also an internal nature. We inspect, oftentimes our homes are being inspected by Well and Good professionals. And so at that point, we can really start to see measurability. We also process work orders. Every one of the work orders, the photos that we take is actually seen by a Well and Good professional on the processing side. And so we try to have these different approaches, like you mentioned. It is both. It is all those things trying to pull together that establishes, the contractor's status, the independent cleaner's status with our company, as well as just the ability to grow is based off of all these factors. And we have tried to bring as much tech into that by creating formulas that produce a contractor rating and all those different things, but it is pulling from multiple sources to get that information.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Now, tell me about that concept of service as a marketing tool. How do we put that in practice? How can property managers, do that?
Yes. Well, I know as a consumer, I've always thought, one of the reasons that I go to Hilton, for instance, is that I know what Hilton is going to feel like, right? I know that there's going to be some consistency there. And so we have lacked that in our industry. Certainly consumer confidence is not strong. And oftentimes that's because there's so much variance between the servicing. And so what we had this hypothesis, and that was that if we were to let the guests know prior to booking that there would be high level servicing, they would be more incentivized to book that property. But that was just theory until we turned it into reality with a large, comprehensive, the largest guest survey that's been done in our industry specifically about servicing. We surveyed over 1,000 guests across multiple US markets and asked them about servicing. So we asked questions like, I would feel more comfortable in a short-term rental if I knew that the laundry was laundered off-site and brought in for my stay versus the same ones laundered on site. 97% of guests said that they would feel more comfortable in that setting. And now we as managers want to make our guests feel comfortable. And so we absolutely should be letting them know that this happened, because if we didn't let them know, how are they to know that? How is that comfort going to be achieved? And we asked all kinds of questions. I'm happy to share the slideshow with anybody that would like of the surveys. We asked things like, what is your soap preference? Would you like individual soap or would you like pump style? The 70% of people wanted pump style soaps rather than individual use soaps. We asked about the linen preference. Would you like white or would you like gray or a colored variety? Over 80% of guests said they prefer standard white sheets. And that information was huge. But the last question we asked was the most impactful. It was the question said, I would be more likely to book a specific short-term rental if I knew it was serviced like a hotel. And 75% of people said that they would be more likely to book that property. So we know guests are comparing between property 1 and property 2. There are a lot of options now presented to guests. So if you are a host or a manager and you have a company like ours who is completing a high level service that mimics the hotel process at the highest level of excellence, if you just present that information prior to booking, there is a higher likelihood that people comparing one or the other, they're going to go with the one that they know has got fresh linens. They're going to go with the ones they know has the high level shampoos and conditioners and all those things that you expect if you were going to a Hilton, let's say. And that service is marketing if it's used correctly by managers.
That's very interesting. And what is something from that survey that you were not expecting or that really surprised you and perhaps changed a bit the way that you are doing things?
We asked about coffee. One of the things that we asked is, what do you prefer, a K-cup or a filter and ground style, right? And I was surprised to hear that there was 72% of folks preferred K-cups over filter and grounds. And that changed a little bit of our perspective. I think the reason for that is people want simplicity when they're at a property. That's why a lot of hotels go this route now, because they just want to know that it's going to be one button and push and there's not a lot of variance there. That was something that we then started to supply more pod style things for our guests or for our managers to supply to their guests. Coffee was one that was definitely an interesting one. I thought that the pump style soaps was also interesting, that 70% of people really wanted to have pump style soaps versus the other style of individual use. And the last thing I'll add about the survey that I thought was very interesting, we asked about the cleaning fee. So we asked, would you prefer to have the cleaning fee included in the nightly rate or added on at the end, right? This is a hot topic in our industry. 87% of guests said that they would prefer the cleaning fee be built into the nightly rate versus added on at the end. And I think we just have to ask ourselves, are we giving that to our consumer? The consumers are saying what they want. How can we as an industry provide this to folks that are demanding exactly that?
And what are you seeing on that topic? How are you seeing hosts or property managers implement this? Is it just, are they just marking up their rates? That's it, and then don't they get out of the market? Like, what have you seen work on this point of giving guests what they want as far as cleaning fees that are embedded into the rate?
It is a super nuanced topic. It's changing all the time. We see that. I think first, the OTAs like Airbnb and Vrbo are absolutely incentivizing hosts who are giving lower fees. So we know that. Like that is if you want to bump in your bookings, lower your cleaning fee. Like that's an absolute thing. And then also the days of making a bunch of profit off of those fees need to be over. I mean, it really needs to be, what is the cleaning cost? Not what is the guest essentials cost, not what is the laundry cost, what is the cost of cleaning? If it's called a cleaning fee, it should be for cleaning. And I think that that's an important aspect of that. We have seen a lot of folks go away from cleaning fees entirely, and the biggest thing about that, you've got to market it, right? You can't just have try to compete in essence in the same pool as others who might have a lower daily rate in that sense. And so there's a marketing component to that. A lot of times those folks are doing direct bookings more often. They're booking through places like Instagram, where they are manufacturing that information all the time. They're letting them know no fees. What you see is what you get. And those direct sides are definitely being less fee driven oftentimes in terms of the cleaning and things. People love Dan's Florida Condos is one of the examples in the Anna Maria Island. He has one price that includes taxes and fees and everything, and people just, it's the easy button, right? They know that they're not paying a single dime more. Oftentimes if folks go on vacation, they get that bait and switch feel, right? They've got the initial price, and then by the time they check out, there was a fee for this and a late checkout fee and all these different things. And I
Mm-hmm.
know our consumers are tired of fees. We're seeing folks do different ways. I'm not saying I have the answer, but I do know
Mm-hmm.
consumers want less fees. There is a cost to servicing. Hotels have always had a cost to clean the property and do the laundry and supply the essentials. That's always been there. They just were not putting it in front of the faces of the consumers the way that we do. We've got to find a way. I'm not saying I have all the answers. That's another podcast for another day, but I do believe that we've got to try, and we're seeing a lot of managers really work to negotiate what is the better way for fees.
Yeah, and also the other hot topic too is like, or at least it used to be one, like there were people complaining, like you're charging, all these fees, all these cleaning fees, and then you've got perhaps non-professional hosts, then expecting that the guests needs to do all these things, upon checkout. So not only I'm charging you a fee, but also I'm expecting you to, do the dishes and, take the sheets and put them in the, in the laundry machine, like whatever that might be. What are your thoughts on that?
We should be embarrassed as an industry at some of the things that we've been asking guests to do. It's embarrassing. I mean, it is. This is a professional industry. This is now a large part of US travel and modern travel as a whole. Align yourself with a professional company like Well and Good, and you will no longer be having to ask the guests to do the job of the housekeeper. You need to have a system. The reason why people are asking to do the laundry or to start a load of laundry is because they're giving the cleaners an impossible task of completing all the laundry in that property within a 2-hour window. It's just not going to happen. And so bad systems create these problems, and like we've seen an industry really have to grow up when it comes to our systems. If we don't, we will fail in consumer confidence. Take a look on Twitter or X or whatever it is, and you'll see all the people complaining about exactly this, an industry that represents a large part of modern travel, but oftentimes is behind when it comes to systems and processes that create seamless stays and the ability to actually be on vacation.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about those systems and processes once again, because you can have the best systems, the best processes, the best tech to log those processes and systems, but then it goes back to the human element of like, how do you actually make sure that your team is using that technology and doing the things that you're asking them to do. So other than what we have discussed before, like specifically in the area of like, hey, you're trying to implement a task management tool or inspection, management tool, whatever that might be, how do you get your team to actually use it?
Yeah, you got to make things simple, and then you do have to make them mandatory. I think that there's a lot of on-site operations that are created in boardrooms that make a lot of sense, and then nobody actually does it. And there's checklists, and there's all these different things that people are just flying through and clicking buttons just to close out the task. And for us, I think that photos are the best checklist, and so we like to have we use technology. Breezeway is our task management software, and they're our partner that allows us to have example photos prior to their stay. So this is prior to the service, so that we can actually know, okay, just take a picture that looks like this, and there's your checklist that shows that you did that thing. There's no point in then having to click a checklist if you just took the photo of that item. And limiting those items, not having it be too much much when it comes to filling out forms, filling out a lot of typing. In-field professionals, they can have a phone that allows them to take pictures, and that picture should tell the story. There should not need to be a lot more typing and a lot more, written reports in essence for folks that are out in the field. Time is of the essence, and we've just found, going into the property and completing a service as me, the CEO of the company, really gives me a great education as to what's actually happening on the field. And we found that some of our checklists, had to be adjusted because the flow of the house is a certain way. And there's certain things that make sense in terms of just straight up maneuvering through a property. And how do you take those pictures in a way that makes sense with the flow of a house? And we obsess over that. There's no easy answers. Besides, you can't just create something up in a boardroom and expect it to be, utilized effectively in a very nuanced, always difficult field operation.
And I like what you said about, being willing to quote unquote get your hands dirty, like go and do the thing and
Yeah.
see, is it easy to actually apply?
A lot of folks have never actually done the thing that they say their company does, right? And that's a problem. If you are, if you are a guest, if you are a manager, you should stay in your property as a guest. You should know exactly what that feels like from the guest perspective. You should know how to complete an inspection and all those things. And that sounds rudimentary, but again, we're dealing with a new industry. And a lot of folks have gotten into this because they heard there's money to be made and they heard that this is going to be easy and it's going to be passive. And so then they just set these things in place and they are so disconnected from what's actually happening. And it shows. It shows by their lack of bookings. It shows by their lack of guest experience. And honestly, it shows by them saturating our industry with less than performing properties. And we need to have people who understand the systems, who know it. And in that, it'll rise our entire industry.
Yeah, for sure. Now, with good systems and good technology comes good management of, say, inventory, right? Which is very important. Then there's also, I would say, a line to be drawn between, charging guests for every single little thing that is perhaps lost or stolen, or every towel that gets a little stain or whatever that may be. Like there's being on top of those things, and then there's sacrificing and hurting the guest experience. So how do you go about that, and what do you tend to suggest your partners to do? What do you tend to suggest them to just eat as a cost of doing business versus, hey, like more than this amount, it starts to become something worth charging the guest for?
So stains of linens and towels is probably the biggest thing that lives in our world in that sense.
Yeah.
Our service includes the replacement of damaged linens and towels as part of the service. We do not charge additionally to our host or managers for these replacements. We used to, but things have changed, right? There is a need to have that more seamless guest experience. And so, yeah, I am of the belief that, a lot of guests are embarrassed oftentimes when they stain things. And there's another element of, I saw this it was a perfect example. And there was a manager that had this big sign that said, if you damage anything, if you stain any items, you're going to be charged a $50 replacement fee. You know what I'm thinking? If I'm the guest, if I'm staining something, there's no way they're going to see it. I'm throwing it in the trash. I'm going to literally get rid of it so that I don't get that $50 charge. And because it's sitting right there that says that I'm going to. And I told that manager, I said, take those down. What we would like to do is actually be able to treat those stains and to be actually, to be able to work with that and not have this uncomfortability, that immediate adversarial relationship that comes from these charges. And I know that it's a difficult thing when you're talking about property damages. Property damages gets into a different level. That's one thing that our company does a really good job is reporting those damages immediately, working with getting proper documentation via photos and all the things that are needed. If there are claims that are necessary, there are now great damage waivers that are had. There's a lot of insurance companies that are helping to not have this be so much on the guest each time, but rather be able to be absorbed within a policy or a damage waiver. And I think those ways are better oftentimes than the fight that oftentimes happens with the guest of, you broke this. And then it's like, okay, well then now you're negotiating, and it's a messy situation that, again, takes people out of consumer confidence and back to, I'm just going to stay at the hotel because I don't want to have to deal with those kind of things. And so we're battling that as an industry, and we know we know what the future will be. The future will be, there will be an insurance process or a damage waiver that covers the major items. The minor incidentals are not going to be charged for, and that's the future. The folks that get to that future as fast as possible will win the market.
That's interesting. Now, we have talked a lot about, taking good care of your team, your people, which is crucial and it's a priority of yours. Now, this is not an easy business to be in. What you like, the business you're in, it's not an easy business to be in. So I'm sure that you deal with a lot of stress and troubleshooting and problems and things coming your way. So like, great, take good care of your team. How do you take good care of yourself so that you can take good care of your team? How do you stay mentally positive? Because you seem to be a very positive guy.
Yeah, I think that's a hard question. I do feel like I really enjoy people. I enjoy the wins that we're giving folks. Oftentimes, this is a little bit of a thankless job in the sense of like, the hosts are only going to come to you when there's a problem and those kind of things. And I do think that can be very, very draining. We do have our core values right behind my shoulder, this side, sorry, that are the guiding post for us as an internal team. And so much of it is, if some of y'all that maybe have a spouse, let's say you have a crazy day at work and you go home and that individual is there, helping you continue to stay motivated. We have that maybe in our families, but I do believe our internal and family, the inside of our operations, we all are very much trying to be the support system for each other in a very difficult industry. You're right. It's extremely tough dealing with people, sometimes people that just straight up disappoint you, teammates that you thought were going to be participating in the values of our company and they don't, and they take advantage of us, and those things happen. I'm a people person. I love the people process. So I'm motivated by that each day. But I do think our team around us and the folks that are in the leadership of our company absolutely pull on the same rope when it comes to, guiding each other to that feeling of like positivity. And hey, we are making progress, and we are seeing wins, and we are seeing so many people's lives are truly better because they have a company that is representing them and not taking advantage of them. And those are long time things. I'm also a little bit of a, you need to sometimes, parenting, a great example, is a thankless job, right? But when those kids grow up, I'm sure thankful for my parents now. I wasn't then, like back then I wasn't at all. So I kind of am understanding that there may not be a lot of accolades now, but I think we're building something and doing it the right way. And I think that'll eventually show. And then there will be gratitude in a macro sense for that.
That makes sense. And would you mind sharing what some of those values are and how do you specifically try to put them in practice? I like talking about values as a frame or a pair of glasses. I use this example a lot where, when you don't have a process for something, but you put on that pair of glasses, it allows you to decide and act rather than just be something that you put in the wall and never, look at again.
That's so it. Our core value of the week, we rotate each of our 10 values each week. This week it is, we shout out the good. And so what does that mean? If it's just on the wall, it doesn't mean anything. But what we mean that as is like, we are not going to just obsess over negativity in our company. We are going to talk about the things that are good. We have a Slack channel that is specifically shout out the good, and it's buzzing every day with something good and something that, hey, this was a nice feedback that we got, or this guest said something nice, or hey, you crushed it on this service. And that is a way to live our values. We are professionals with a standard of excellence is another one. So that element of like, we are professionals. So we are absolutely needing to identify ourselves as what we are. If we don't have that continual, I am a professional and my standard is excellence, then we will sometimes get into some of the lies we tell ourselves, right? I'm not capable, or I can't do this. We find the better way is another core value for us. That indicates that we don't always have the right way. We are always looking for that better way. If we think we've arrived with our processes and our systems and that it's so lockstep, we are going to miss out on better ways to do things. So we find the better way. I'll give one more example, which is that we insist on professional development. And so we embrace professional development, meaning what I referenced earlier. I think professionals can develop right there in that role. We have And University, where people can go and listen to books. Three Signs of a Miserable Job being one of them. I need to reread it so I can remember the third thing, that where they can read those things and get actual badges on their Slack profiles that says that they did some education and things like that, because professional development is ongoing. And those are the ways that we have values, and then we try to live them with our day-to-day operations.
That's amazing. You are, in a business that is a people business, as you've said, and you've been in this people business since forever, right? Since
my whole
you
adult life.
started.
Yes.
Since you started in entrepreneurship, it's been service businesses. So I guess I want to wrap this up with on people management and understanding people standpoint. I think you're in a unique position, having dealt with so many people in this kind of a work environment that you're dealing with. So what's something you wish you had known when you were starting, perhaps that you know now, around how to make the most out of people?
I think some of the most powerful words that we can say and live is just simply, I see you. And people need to be seen. It is the thing that we are missing as a society. We are missing that as people, is just being seen. We feel like no one notices us. We're surrounded by people, but no one sees us. And so I think back then, I probably would have maybe known that subconsciously, but not known how important it is to say those things and how to actually verbalize it and turn it into large scale systems that allow people to feel seen. And, it does start with shouting out the good and letting people know that, like, hey, the work you do matters. And how does it matter? Let's talk about the guest. I think for the first time ever, we have cleaners who are cleaning homes thinking positive thoughts about the guests that are coming in, rather than cussing out the guests and these people are always trashing these houses and that kind of thing. Like, if we can let them be seen, oftentimes people that do felt seen are often then able to see others, and they're able to actually have that empathy. And I think we have got to truly have more of that acknowledgement. And in today's world, especially with these screens, we're looking at each other through screens, and oftentimes that diminishes human to human connection. We've got to have it. I learned early on that if I can put my actual face in front of the face of somebody, I think we're going to have a better chance of a good outcome. And we try to stress that as our teammates. Our training should be in person. Our correction should be in person. These things matter. Individuals need to be seen.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it. Well, listen, Jonathan, I could have you on here for hours, because this has been very, very fun and enjoyable. Where can people connect? Where can people get that survey that you were referring to earlier, or get in touch with you?
Touch base with us. We're online at our website is wellandgood.pro, and that is also our Instagram handle. Those are two great places to find us, at wellandgood.pro. The other aspect would be LinkedIn. I'm Jonathan Wicks at LinkedIn. You can also look up our company, Well and Good, at LinkedIn. And those are connection points. I love talking to folks who are interested in service and who care about the human aspect. We cannot have an industry if it is not for the thousands of people who on a daily basis break a sweat and go out there and do the thing. And so I love talking to folks. If they're ever interested in reaching out to us or using our service, that's the best ways to find us.
Love it. Thanks so much, Jonathan, for your time.
It was great chatting with you, Sebastian. See you soon.